For those of us just joining you, we have people rolling in. We'll get started in just a couple of minutes. All right, we seem to have converged. Hello, I'm Aaron Bobick. I'm the Dean of the McKelvey School of Engineering. We're up to about 125 plus folks joining us here within Zoom and about another couple dozen on YouTube. So I want to thank all of you for coming to try to get as many of your questions answered as possible. Tonight, we're going to be focused predominantly on academic questions about courses, scheduling, advising, work, exams, all the things that have to do with academics with respect to the engineering courses and delivery. To convey almost all the information, or some people who actually know something. First is Jay Turner, who is a professor in our Energy, Environment, and Chemical Engineering department, and he's the Vice Dean of Education, and it's fallen to him to help coordinate all of the sort of the course offerings and the pedagogy and remote and hybrid and the training and all of what we're doing. And the other is Chris Kroeger, who most of the students just think of as Dean Kroeger, and they're pretty sure he's just the dean. And most days that's actually true. Chris runs Undergraduate Student Services, and it's Chris's organization that, and students, that's Dean Kroeger to you, it's his organization that manages all the logistics and how it relates to the rest of the university. So they have a moderately brief presentation that they'll give you that'll outline a bunch of details and also respond to some of the questions that were given to us in advance. And then we hope to have plenty of time to handle questions. Chris and Jay will go a little bit more to the logistics of this meeting, but all of you should know that there's a Q&A component where you can provide questions, and then we'll try to answer as many of them as possible. So Chris, why don't you, or Jay, get going.
Thank you very much, Dean Bobick, and thank all of you for being here tonight with us. Just want to point out, in case you're not aware, that the astronauts that recently came back to Earth a couple of days ago, two of them, one of them was Bob Binken. He is an alum of the McKelvey School of Engineering. He earned his BS in mechanical engineering and BS in engineering physics with us. And what they're doing really points out that they're still actively engaged in their mission despite COVID-19, just like we are. So when you think, every organization really relies on its mission and its mission statement. And regardless of what's taking place with COVID-19 or not, we've got to fulfill that mission. One of the things I love about working with the engineering students is these past 30 years is that they are very realistic. They don't let bumps in the road slow them down. They look realistically about what's taking place, and they find ways to adapt and improvise and to keep moving forward to get things accomplished. And that's exactly why we're here tonight and going forward with the fall semester. Our goal here is to answer the questions that you had submitted to us, and then open it up for more questions in the Q&A box. So health and safety is going to be extremely pressed here while students are on campus. It's based upon sound science. We want students to wear a mask, to engage in physical distancing, do the daily self-screening, wash your hands often. Students will be required to complete an online public health training and a pledge in Canvas before the semester starts. And Professor Turner will talk about educational delivery, which was a big question.
So our courses in the fall semester can be broadly stratified into 3 different groups. And as you can see at the bottom of the screen, if you go onto the WashU course listings website, there, and you click where it currently says hide, but normally it would say details, right below the course number, that will pull up additional details. So again, below the course number, click on a blue details, it'll pull up the description of the course. But we bring your attention to the instruction type, which Chris has highlighted here in yellow for this particular example. That's where you want to look for what mode the course would be offered in. There's 3 different modes. One is classroom instruction. And what this means is the course is available only in person. That is, it cannot be taken remotely. At this time in McKelvey, there are only 2 courses that fall into this category. The second group we have are courses that are termed remote per COVID-19. These are courses that will be offered fully remote. Almost all of them will have a deep synchronous component during the scheduled class time, but there will not be in-person activities during the class time. Most of our courses fit into a model called hybrid. And what happens in this case is that you have the option whether to attend in person or whether to attend online. And again, the online would be synchronous during your regular scheduled class time. For many courses, these synchronous class sessions are supplemented by pre-recorded lectures, and then the class sessions themselves are more of what's called a flipped environment, which focuses more on discussion and exercises rather than presenting additional new material. Next slide, please. So just a little more about the hybrid courses, because this is the one that's probably a little less familiar to folks. So they come in many different flavors. They're influenced to some extent by enrollment, but instructors have thought very deeply about what would be effective ways to convey the course material. And so there are many different versions. But with regard to how it might stratify by class, by course size, by enrollments, for very small courses, nominally those less than about 20, if the instructor so chooses, students could attend every class in person. Even with de-densified classrooms, there will be space in the classrooms for everyone to attend, if that's indeed the model the instructor has set up. For medium-sized classrooms, it's more of a rotation business. What you can expect in this scenario is that, let's say you have class twice a week, perhaps half the students would be in person on the first session, the rest joining remotely. Then the second session that week, the other half of the students could be in person, and the students who were in person in the first session are now joining remotely in real time during that second session. For large courses, we can accommodate some of them through this rotation approach. Others are going to have their traditional lecture be an online session, remote only, and then with the goal of having subsections or recitation sections in person to the extent practicable. So I want to just make really clear though, that in these hybrid mode courses, it's your option whether or not you're in person or you're participating remotely. Back to you, Chris.
Thank you. There was a number of questions about the pass-fail policy. We did allow more pass-fail in the spring. The spring was incredibly unique. I've never seen a time like that before where we had to pivot to totally online, and the faculty literally had about a week to get ready to pivot to online, and so did the students. So we were more flexible, but there was consistent agreement among all the undergraduate divisions here on campus that we should return back to our original pass-fail policy. So we are pivoting back to the normal policy, where some of your elective courses can be taken pass-fail, but your required courses will need to be taken for letter grade. And in McKelvey, every school is a little bit different in terms of how many pass-fail courses they allow. In McKelvey, we allow up to 6 units per semester to be taken pass-fail. If you have any questions about this, please contact your four-year advisor. Your WU Achieve degree audit also is helpful in terms of listing what courses are allowed to be taken pass-fail, and the bulletin should also outline that. So our plan is, even if we have to pivot to fully remote during the fall, the current pass-fail policy will stay in place and stay normalized. Some of the key deadlines to please keep in mind that they have been in some communications, but we just want to make sure everyone is fully aware of them. Classes will begin on September 14th this year. And we did extend the add drop deadline a bit. So September 30th is a deadline to add or drop courses without transcript notation. No fall break this year. Thanksgiving will be 2 days in length, and only in the Thursday and the Friday. Classes will be in that previous Wednesday. If you do go home for Thanksgiving, we do ask that you complete the remainder of the semester at home. December 4th will be the deadline to change grade options between letter grade and pass, fail, or audit, and also the deadline to withdraw from a course without or with transcript notation. Last day of classes for the semester will be in December 18th. That's when we expect that most people living in the residence halls will return home. And there are some provisions in place for students who aren't able to go home to stay in their residence halls. All final exams will be administered remotely. That'll take place between January 4th and January 10th. Number of students have also asked about leave of absence, and there is a difference between gap year versus leave of absence. A gap year is for an incoming first-year student, and it's not really a leave. They are just deferring taking any classes at all before they come back a year later. There are really 3 different types of leave of absences. Medical leave is the type that we see most of our students take if they take a leave. We typically have 10 to 20 students every year in McKelvey who take a medical leave of absence. We do have a few every year who take a military leave of absence. The regular leave of absence is what students are most interested in right now and finding out more information. So a leave really indicates a leave from coursework for a specific time. Normally that's for a year. Sometimes it might be a bit longer. Loan deferrals may require 6 units of enrollment while you're in leave, and that would typically not be here. That would be where you're back home. Normally, we don't allow any coursework online to be taken while students are in leave, but for this coming semester only, we're allowing up to 6 units to be taken online from other universities that you can transfer back. Those units must be pre-approved. We have a very robust database that shows all the courses that we've approved in the past. There's thousands of courses in the database. So if you find one of those courses online at a university while you're in leave, you can take those and then we'll transfer those back here. Please be aware that some departments have specific constraints on the number of units that students can take outside of their department. Computer science is the prime example, where they allow up to 2 elective courses to transfer units to be counted towards their degree requirements here. Is a leave of absence a good idea? I think it really depends. If there are medical issues involved, or if you have something meaningful to do while you're in leave, then yes, it might be worth taking a leave. But also keep in mind that if you take a leave, you're spending an extra year away from school, getting closer to your degree completion and getting a full-time job. So if you're not going to be engaged in meaningful activity, then taking a leave may not be the best idea. We do ask that you let us know by August 14th if you plan to take a leave. You can email your 4-year advisor. August 14th is not a hard deadline. That does ensure, though, it allows students to take your spot if they're in a wait list on a course. Resources for help. The resources really are not changing in terms of available resources for students on campus. The most important one to always talk to is your course professor. Let them know if you're struggling early on. I know a mistake I see a lot of students make is that if they're struggling, they put it off, they think they're going to get caught up, and then it snowballs and it becomes almost impossible for them to catch up. So very early on, if you find yourself struggling in a course, let the course professor know, and then he or she may have some ideas on how to help you. Your 4-year advisor in our office, please reach out to them, let them know. They may be able to contact other resources for you or make you aware of other resources on campus, and all of the other things that are typically available in some way or form should be available to you this fall semester. The TAs, the assistant to the instructors, the tutoring that we offer through our office, your faculty advisor, and so on. So, reach out to them. Don't suffer in silence. That we really want you to get the help that you need. Our office is there. We have been having ongoing Zoom meetings since we left our office. We're going to have a virtual front door for students to pop in and see us if they have questions. We're continuously looking for ways to help students find more connections. Great example of that is that we have a McKelvey Mentors program taking place for our first year students coming up, where first year students will be paired with some current students. We asked our current students if they would like to participate, and this was really a brainchild with In Council, which is our umbrella student group, and they're working with our office to have this take place. So 2 or 3 or 4 first year students will be matched with a current student, and they'll be interacting together before they arrive to campus. So some of the questions we're not covering here are areas that are not McKelvey specific. These are not necessarily in our specific wheelhouse. We really want to spend this time focused on what your academic experience is going to be like here. So if there's questions related to these areas, we likely will not address them. So some of the questions that were pre-submitted, and we had some great ones that came in. One of them was, will transcripts indicate whether you choose to take a class in person or remotely? And the answer to that is no. Someone looking at your transcript, there's no way for them to know if that class was taken remotely or in person. It just has the course number, the title on it, and the grade received. Will students who take all their classes remotely be considered full-time students? Yes. So if you're enrolled in 12 or more units as an undergraduate, you are classified as a full-time student. Can students take fewer than 12 credits this semester and still be considered full-time? 12 units is considered the full-time status, so you would need to be enrolled in 12 or more to have the full-time student status. Can undergraduate students study part-time? Currently, the policy has been no. There are some discussions taking place as to whether that might change or not. I don't have a definite answer to give you right now. If this policy changes, an email will go out to all students letting them know. Will classes taught remotely enroll more students? In other words, will more students be taken off the wait list? So wait lists are handled on a course-by-course basis. Now, the course size is not always dependent upon the classroom size. The other constraining variables is really the amount of work, homework and graded work and exams that a professor can handle, and how many assistant to the instructors that instructor might have. So the wait list may not, or the wait list class sizes may not increase, so more students may not necessarily be taken off the wait list. But waitlisted students should know that they have full access to all the material in Canvas up until the drop deadline, so that you can decide whether or not you can still take, if you want to take the class, if you're taken off the wait list. If a student is sick and unable to complete coursework, what are the options? This isn't really so different than normal. If you do become ill, please let your four-year advisor know. And typically what happens is your four-year advisor will email your instructors, letting them know that you're sick. And then the student would typically work with the instructor to make up missed work. In the new situation that we're in with COVID-19, you may be quarantined or isolated. If you're found to have COVID-19, you should be able to continue on with your work while isolated if you feel up to it. The professors, again, they will work with you on an individual case-by-case basis. If necessary, there's always the option to take a medical leave of absence if things get really bad, or incomplete grades are also an option. Will there be study abroad experiences in spring of 2021? We hope so. We have a lot of student interest in study abroad. I think there's like 50 students right now who are planning to do spring study abroad. It'll just depend upon what the world health situation is at that time. How will the new 15-minute passing time work? So normally there's 10 minutes of passing time between classes. We've instituted 15 minutes for the coming semester. So that way, if you're doing a hybrid and you're in person, but your next class you're going to do remote, that gives you time to get back to your room or to a study pod to actually then tune into that class. So that extra 15 minutes should be helpful for students to get from one class to the next, whether or not it's in person or remote. And next ones are for Professor Turner.
We had several questions about the modes of instruction. And so rather than presenting you with those questions and then providing a response. We're just aggregating together what some of the key highlights are. We've already talked a bit about the remote instruction, but again, just to emphasize a few key points. Whenever the instruction type is listed in the course listings as remote per COVID-19, that means it's an online course only. There is no in-person component. And as we've already discussed, hybrid is a very common course type, instruction mode. And this could be a very attractive mode in that, again, it gives you the option whether to attend in person or to attend remote. And so, for example, if you become sick or some other conflict arrives that prevents you from physically getting to the classroom, you can join synchronously online for that course. Also, as we already mentioned, due to the modified classroom capacities, not every student will necessarily be able to attend every session in person unless that class is really small. And the instructors have been designing their courses for this type of engagement, where some students will be in person in the classroom and simultaneously other students will be online in a synchronous fashion, and the instructor will engage both groups. Students can switch back and forth between the in-person and remote presence that they would have. And again, we're really adhering to the course structure in terms of having synchronous activities during the actual scheduled class time. That is, for the class schedule that you signed up for back in the spring. That said, all of the sessions will be recorded so that students who can't join the synchronous session will be able to review it later online. We really encourage you and indeed urge you to attend the synchronous class sessions. But as we know, even during regular semesters, things come up and you might need to miss a class session. Well, now you have the benefit of being able to join asynchronously. Or for the students who might be halfway around the globe, asynchronous might be the only realistic option by which they could attend the class session. If a student has to isolate or quarantine, again, you can continue to take classes as long as your health permits by joining in the online only or in the remote mode. Will the online learning experience for fall be different than in the spring? It'll certainly share some similarities in terms of there will be a strong online presence for each of the courses, regardless of their modality, again, except for the two courses that I previously alluded to. But a big difference here is that in the spring, we had to pivot very quickly to emergency remote instruction, as we like to call it. So instructors had to stand up online teaching in very short order. They've been working very hard this summer on education pedagogy and how you actually have strong online components in your courses. So in that way, it will be different than it was in the fall in terms of the efforts being put in to enhance the online experience, as well as also provide this in-person experience to the extent practicable. How will online students be integrated into the in-person classroom? So as we already discussed with the hybrid approach, that'll all occur synchronously. So there'll be chat moderators in most cases who will be monitoring what's happening in the chat thread and be able to ask questions. Students in person can ask questions. If the people online can't hear it, instructors will repeat those questions. And for small classes, students will likely be who are remote will likely just be able to turn on their microphones and ask questions in that case. I should also point out again that some students might be fully asynchronous. And again, we're working really hard to provide a good experience for those students. Will the grading process for online and in-person courses be different? For the vast majority of cases, it will be the same. An instructor might have a compelling reason why it would be different, but as of now, to my knowledge, it is the same for all courses. If they do have a reason why it would be different, that'll be presented in the course syllabus and discussed on the first day of class. And again, that's consistent with students moving back and forth, especially for this hybrid mode. Will classrooms maintain safe social distancing standards? Yes, yes, and yes. So all of the classrooms have already been evaluated for meeting those standards. They've been significantly de-densified in terms of their modified classroom capacities. For some rooms, we're able to get about 50% of the original capacity. For other rooms, it's as little as 15 or 20% of the original capacity. So we have all of those protocols already in place, And that's driven the modified classroom capacities that we're now using to assign courses to classrooms. How will labs be handled online? The most common way that labs will be handled is, and this is for more of the non-computer oriented labs, is that you can imagine a rotation process where if you're in, say, a group of 3 students, any given week, 1 student would be in the lab conducting the experiment. The other 2 students would be watching remotely with webcams and microphones. So like in the case of my department, our flagship lab, every single experiment is being outfitted with the technology so that students remotely are not just observing what their colleague, what their partner is doing, they're actually engaging in discussion and interacting as the experiment's being conducted. What safety measures are being taken in the lab courses to ensure physical distancing, and also when experiments are being performed? So here again, we have protocols, we have guidelines for how to lay out the laboratory spaces, and those are being laid out as we speak to assure proper physical distancing takes place. We've already got rich experience with this because of our research labs over the summer. We've modified those guidelines and protocols to be appropriate for the teaching labs, and that's being implemented now. TA office hours. This is an area where we're really driving these office hours to be online. There may be a few very limited cases where a compelling request could be made that they would be in person, but overwhelmingly the intent is that office hours with both instructors and TAs will be online. Next up, thanks. Exams and exam schedules. So this comes down to the purview of the individual instructor. As we already know, all final assessments conducted in January, those will be fully online. As for exams that happen during the semester, that's going to be up to the individual instructor how to do it. I do know, talking with my colleagues, the majority of them are planning on all of their exams being online only. There are other provisions, though, where there may be an in-person opportunity, but instructors are working hard to make sure that that the situation would be equitable in that case, and they have to be able to demonstrate that that is indeed the case, that we preserve equity if students are taking exams both online and in person. So this is a question about when final assessments are taking place in January. Students are home, they're in different time zones around the US and also around the world. Yes, instructors will be taking this into consideration. Certainly we'll need some cooperation from students to flex their times a little bit, but we have no intentions or expectations that students are going to get up at 3 in the morning to take exams. These will be clearly stated in the course syllabus. Can I do research with a faculty member? Yes, yes, and yes. We pride ourselves on undergraduate research. There will continue to be opportunities. The distinction here is the flavor will be overwhelmingly online opportunities, modeling, analyzing data, coding, doing things like that. Independent studies will not take place in the research lab this semester. And there will need to be a very, very compelling reason why an undergraduate would otherwise be in a research lab, such as someone who's been doing ongoing work on a mission-critical research for that group. Textbooks. So the textbook information should be available online from the bookstore. We will confirm that that's the case, and if indeed it's not the case, then we'll ask the instructors to release that information to everyone who's both in the course enrolled and also on the wait list. But that information should be available through the bookstore website. Should students bring their own computers, and will the computer labs be open? So it's your discretion whether to bring a printer. The McKelvey printers will be accessible, the ones that students normally access. As for the computer labs, that's still being assessed. Our aspirational goal is that they would not be available outside of class times, but a final decision has not yet been made. But my guess today is that they will not be available outside of class times.
And Professor Turner, I think that there were some other questions that were submitted that we didn't have a chance to put on the slides that you were going to answer.
Yes, thanks, Chris. I'd just like to quickly get to a few questions submitted after we prepared the slide deck before we went live. One is regarding will information be distributed about research positions? Here we use our regular channels. In a few departments, they advertise as a department research availability. In other departments, it's a matter of you exploring on the website or through other students that you know what research groups may be of interest to you, and you reaching out individually to that faculty member and starting to engage in a discussion about opportunities. For example, I've had two students reach out to me in just the last 2 weeks, and I've already signed them up to do research in my group this fall. What are our intentions in getting back to campus to the spring? We're not going to discuss that today. We're thinking deeply about the spring, but there's just too many unknowns at this point for us to begin to foreshadow what the spring might look like. Will the engineering school have a common system in which it decides on which hybrid courses will work? I've already gone through that largely in the context. And again, in the context of class sizes being one parameter, instructor desires is another parameter in terms of them looking at their course content and deciding what works best for their course, the hybrid approach or the fully online approach. If students are put on a rotation for hybrid courses, can they request to be put in a certain rotation with friends, or will it be random? That's a great question. We're actually going to take that back to the instructors and ask them to consider that as they're planning their group assignment. Back to you, Chris.
Thank you. So we do have some questions in the Q&A box, so I'll go through those and we can decide who will answer them. When will classes begin in the spring semester after students leave in the fall? Is that the 25th of January? It's on my calendar. You know what? Let me go there very quickly. I can look at that. 25th? Okay.
It's January 25th.
Okay,
Yes.
that Monday. Thank you. Are first year students allowed to take a leave of absence for a semester and complete coursework 6 units elsewhere? First year students, if they want to take a leave, they have to take a gap year. It's because of course sequencing, and there are some crucial courses that first year for engineering students that they need to stay on track with, and that would be really difficult to do in a part-time mode. So all the first years would need to take a gap year. Can a student take classes scheduled at the same time if they're going to be asynchronous? Professor Kroeger, what are your thoughts? Yeah, he may be frozen there.
Yeah, just a moment.
Sure.
Yes. So no, students should not be taking courses that are scheduled at the same time. While we will provide an asynchronous opportunity for students who are not able to join synchronously because of, say, time zone differences, the intent is for you to engage synchronously to the extent possible. And therefore, we will not be allowing you to take classes at the same scheduled time.
Thank you. And Emily, hi, good to see you. Will office hours be offered in person if courses are remote?
Again, when it comes to office hours, overwhelmingly, the office hours are going to be online.
Do you have any idea how many students will be taking classes in person yet?
No.
No.
We're looking forward to hearing back from all of you.
For the 15 minutes and 5 minutes removed out of class, hour-long classes were 50 minutes with 10 minutes of passing time, and it is now 45 minutes of class with 15 minutes of passing time. That is correct. So class time for each session was decreased by 5 minutes to allow for more passing time. Can hybrid courses have mandatory in-person labs?
Overall, the general response is that you can take the lab courses fully online. And again, you just would not be part of that rotation. We have taken this question back to each of our instructors, and we'll be confirming from them by Monday whether or not there are any labs that would require a small in-person component from each student. But right now, the answer is no. But again, check the course listings again after Monday, and we should have that clarified if there are a few exceptions.
Will January finals be synchronous, or is that class dependent?
That is class dependent. The instructor will cover that their first day of class and in their syllabus.
Are all hybrid courses
But
synchronous?
even when they're synchronous, there will certainly be accommodations made for students that are in dramatically different time zones.
Thank you. Are all hybrid courses
Or all
synchronous?
hybrid courses sync. Yeah. So yes, that's the hybrid courses. The intent is that they'll all have a synchronous component. Again, it might be it might be the lecture, or it might be where lectures are pre-recorded and in a flipped classroom setting. Then this would be more of a recitation or discussion section, but they will be synchronous during the scheduled class time.
Machine Shop Practica MEMS 1001 still shows 0 seats with 0 enrolled in all sections. When will the class open? The waitlisted seats, I know there's a wait list set up for all those sections, and the departments will be so MEMS in this case will be the one who processes those. I haven't seen their specific timeline yet, but I know it'll be in the near future. When will we be allowed to return to undergraduate research labs?
We don't know. Aaron, would you like to briefly make a comment about this?
Sure.
The bottom line is we just don't know yet.
Let's say just a little bit more than that. So the university sort of in parallel to the entire educational mission, we have this significant research mission. And like education, it went completely virtual in late March. No one was allowed on campus except to do things like maintain animal colonies or prevent gases from blowing up. Other than that, everything was remote. And we stepped up from that was red to an orange to a yellow level of research. But fundamental to keeping the lab safe is low density. I mean, the bottom line is we have to try to minimize the number of people in any given laboratory at any given point in time. We're doing this with the researchers. We do this with the graduate students. They have very carefully developed schedules. So as Jay had mentioned, there are some undergraduates that are involved in mission critical research with respect to those research agendas, and they may be part of that. But in terms of generally opening up, undergraduates do independent study projects and those kinds of things in the laboratory. That'll depend upon when we can get to a higher level of density in the research labs. And that's going to depend dramatically on the amount of community prevalence, the number of cases seen in the communities, both here and elsewhere. And so, as all of you know, we can't really make any prediction about that. For the safety of our faculty, our researchers, our grad students, and our undergraduates, we have to keep that density down.
Thanks, Aaron.
Thank you. For hybrid courses, when will the students be informed which days they'll be able to attend classes on site?
I love that question. I was working on my own course last week and it came up, oh, who will be there my first day? I guess I need to work that out in advance. So the instructors will be reaching out to all of you beforehand. And probably what they'll be doing in most cases is turning on their Canvas site, but they'll send you an email, several days in advance of classes starting, and they'll let you know how they're going to handle that first week and getting the rotation schedule up and going. I know some instructors are planning to have that first 2 sessions, that first week being online, and then after that, starting the second week, they'll settle into a groove. Others are going to start that rotation right away.
I want a wait list for a class. Since I will be remote, can I still take it? Yes, if it's a remote or hybrid class, you could still take it as long as you're taken off the wait list for it. If you're on the wait list, you should have full access to everything in Canvas for the course, so you could still do the material until you find out. If you're not, until the add drop period. I would probably be in contact with the faculty member just to find out from him or her what's the likelihood of getting off the wait list. You might wait for a while to see how things shake out here in the next couple of weeks with student enrollments, and but that's the strategy that I would do. Professor Turner, anything else that you would add to that?
Yeah, I just like to reiterate the question has previously come up whether or not we would let everyone on the wait list into classes, and the answer in most cases is no, because of instructor bandwidth for making sure the students enrolled in the class have a good educational experience. And some of these courses are very intensive in terms of the assistance to instructor contact with students. And we just can't open up the courses to all takers. under those circumstances.
I think it's important to reiterate that limits on class sizes very rarely had to do with how many warm bodies can we fit within a classroom. It had to do with all the other contact hours and resources necessary to support the educational goals of the course. So just because something has gone remote and therefore we're not subject to physical constraints of people sitting within a classroom, that doesn't remove those other constraints having to do with number of TA hours and the number of TAs involved, or the types of interactions that people have with the instructor. So it might feel a little counterintuitive of why there is a cap on a number of students when things are done remotely, but that's because the actual limiting factor was not the physical size of the classroom, but actually the other resources that were necessary to make the course really an excellent educational experience.
If students have a Mac that will not run certain engineering programs, how will they complete coursework if the computer labs are not open?
So let me address that one. It's only because I'm a bit of a computer geek. And I'll also take the next question, which says if lab computers are not available outside, what happens if personal computers can't run a heavy process like SolidWorks and others, or the EE? So actually, we've already addressed this actually pretty effectively. So for many of you know, we run a virtual desktop environment already for things like SolidWorks, because even if you have a reasonable laptop, if you don't have a great GPU performance, you don't really run SolidWorks very well. So we use a remote desktop capability that lets people get to run all of those programs and run them effectively. And you can use that whether you've got a Mac PC or an Abacus, maybe not an Abacus. They've been pretty effective so far. And the same thing is true for the EE machines. The one place that there has been some effort to work around is that we had some machines that had special hardware devices. And those courses are being modified so that becomes not the issue for this year.
Online exams with time constraints can be stressful. How will internet issues affect ability to submit exams?
So this is something we're actually discussing with instructors right now. We're putting together some best practices information to share with all of them and engage them in a discussion. We learned a lot from the student evaluations of teaching. You know, those of you who are second year and above that you filled out after the spring. And this was a concern that came up, was the periodic internet issues. So we're working with instructors on how they can rework the timing of these particular issues to make sure that there aren't technology barriers to getting your exams and such submitted.
When will information be distributed about teaching assistant positions?
Unfortunately, don't have that. That's a departmental level. That's a departmental level decision, and I know some of them have been in the process of doing it. Others have not yet started, but that's something that I'll definitely take back to the departments.
As an incoming freshman, I'm wondering how I will learn all of this critical material without traditional study groups.
Yeah, so this is where, you know, we're all learning how to adapt to this. And, you know, there's a lot to be learned from industry about how people collaborate together. We don't have the time to go through all of it today, but certainly, you know, there's a lot of approaches on how you can study and how you can work remotely in teams. There's a lot of tools to help you do that, some of which are available free through the university, like one called Teams. But the bottom line is that we'll certainly be socializing what some good practices are in this space for students. But this is really going to be a learning environment on how to optimize this as you hit the semester running.
If we have classes back to back and one is in person and one is remote, but we live off campus and can't get home in 15 minutes, will there be places, labs on campus in the engineering campus open to remote class?
Yes, there will be. There are a lot of spaces being set up on campus where students can be participating in their classes, if you will.
And to put a point on it, they're going to be setting up on the order of 1,000 what are called Zoom Dine Study little carrels. They're essentially a desk with a three-sided barrier where you could sit there, use your laptop on the Wi-Fi, eat something, without a mask on. And those are going to be set up all around campus, because we're quite sensitive to this question of being able to participate in Zoom or other remote-based interaction while you're still on campus, maybe between two courses that you're doing, or something else that you need to do on the campus itself.
When will students be let into CSE 132? I'll just mention that I know there's a rumor among some of the students that CS 132 has been canceled, and we've confirmed with the department that that's not the case, and they will soon be processing the wait list in the near future for that class and some of the other CS classes. My daughter worked as a teaching assistant last semester. Is that still an option?
Definitely. Yes. And again, the departments are still working on what their teaching assistant needs are for this semester. And they will indeed be making opportunities available in the near future.
Can independent study be done remotely?
Yes, yes, and yes. And again, case in point, just signed up 2 students in my group to do that. A large number of instructors will be providing these types of opportunities for remote independent study work.
As an engineering graduate, I know from personal experience how difficult the coursework can be for new students. Will the possible challenges and unfamiliarity of virtual learning that most students may experience, are instructors considering modified grading systems such as curving?
Yeah, so this is a tricky one. There's no doubt that the learning environment is unfamiliar to students, just like it's unfamiliar to instructors, actually. And when it comes to the grading system, instructors are being asked to take into consideration how they teach their course and what the most effective ways to do assessments are. And so while some may, and just to give an example, in some courses that might mean moving more towards more frequent lower stakes assessments rather than just a few high stakes assessments, things like that. So when it comes to grading system, that's really deeply coupled with how assessments will be done. And that will be different for many courses this semester as they try to lower the stakes of high stakes exams in several courses at least.
Is there a possibility that all classes will become online?
Yeah, go ahead, Aaron.
Let me answer that one. The short answer is, of course. The university is subject to the laws and regulations of the city, county, and state and federal laws for that matter. And if there are restrictions placed on people gathering that are imposed by various government bodies, we would absolutely have to do that. There are other metrics that the university is establishing in terms of prevalence of positive cases, and if those in the community and in campus, and if those were to exceed those levels, a fully remote option would have to be taken. That's one of the reasons that getting all the students and faculty and staff to be as compliant as possible, and really that should be all the time, with the health protocols that are in place is so critical. Because in order for us to be able to maintain this educational mission, doing this hybrid and in-person as possible, we need to try to minimize the spread of the virus. And the only way that'll happen is by adhering to those protocols.
If 2 professors lecture for the same course, will students be able to attend the Zoom lecture of whichever professor they better learn from, as long as they take exams from the assigned professor?
That's hard for me to answer because courses that have multiple sections come in many different flavors. And often there's a lot more to participating in a specific section with a specific instructor than just the exams. So that's something that we would really have to take up on a case-by-case basis.
Are course times set now? Is it possible that professors change times to accommodate other students?
No, the course schedule is set. We are adhering to the schedule that was actually published and that students registered for, in the spring and then the first years during the summer. So we'll be adhering to that schedule, which I think provides clarity for everyone rather than trying to adjust course times at this stage.
Are tutoring applications still open for those who know they'll be able to help now that the plans for schools are becoming more concrete? Absolutely. Ashley Gooder-Rice in our office is the person who is working with the tutors in Chris Ramsey's area. So please email Ashley or Chris Ramsey and they'll be able to help you with that. Are all professors going to teach in person or any teachers teaching remotely?
Yeah, I think I get the gist of Jacqueline's question here. You could envision a hybrid course with students in person and the instructor in person, or students in person and the instructor remote. So that's something that actually has come up in discussion. I don't anticipate that happening very often. I expect the courses are either going to be or hybrid with the instructor in person, or fully online with the instructor and all the students remote. There may be one or two cases that would crop up where that's the case, especially say in the case that the instructor gets sick, where they could still continue the course remotely.
Will registration meetings with advisor time slot assignments happen? So most of them should have happened already for fall. If they haven't, please reach out to your four-year or your faculty advisor to do that. If we're talking about spring registration, then absolutely, we've already got the schedule in place for when students will get registration approval with their advisors. And I know with our office, all of our advising meetings have been by Zoom the last 4 months. It's gone exceptionally well. And we will continue to do that with the four-year advisors. And I'm certain that the faculty advisors will also have phone meetings or other types of Zoom meetings set up for their advisees to meet with. I have no personal preference. Would you recommend a Mac or a Dell laptop for the engineering school? Does one have a certain advantage over the other?
I'm going to turn that one back to the computer science geek on the panel here.
I'm gonna probably find. CS is a little bit different than some of the other engineering disciplines. I think probably for some of the other engineering disciplines, there might be some ease. It might be a little bit easier using Windows-based machines. For computer science, I'm going to punt on that one, and we can get the answer to you for that. As you know, the underpinnings of Macs are Unix, and all true CS people believe Unix is just way better than Windows anyway. I'll be agnostic on that, so we can get you the more specific answer to that question. I will tell you that we have plenty of students in all disciplines using both platforms.
I think we have a website out there in EIT that lists what the requirements are, what they recommend. So you might look for that. It shouldn't be too hard to find. If you can't find it, email me and I'll point you to the right direction.
And that's correct, Chris. In fact, the engineering IT just recently revisited and affirmed that the list is correct. Thank
you. Will clubs be remote? By and large, yes. Most of the student interactions, a lot of that will be virtual, but we are looking at ways that students might be able to interact in person on a limited basis. So more information will be coming out to the student groups in the near future about that before classes begin. I know student union our student affairs and student union have their rules, and engineering school will have their rules too. But we definitely want the student groups to interact. We want you to be virtual. We want you to fully engage with if it's virtual or limited in person. So we see that experience is very important to your overall educational experience. Is there any indication of how professors plan to hold office hours?
Yeah, so there'll be differences because a lot of it depends on the scale, the number of students enrolled in courses. So they'll be holding their office hours online. In some cases, the instructors will be just, essentially open Zoom rooms where lots of students could be there at once. That does get unwieldy if the course is really, really large. In that case, some of the instructors essentially set up a wait list, and there's additional software that they use that essentially queue up students to be able to come into the office hour. However, if you have matters that you need to discuss one-on-one with an instructor, you can also set up a separate appointment to do that.
Just one thing that hasn't been mentioned, and it's a university at large question, but I just want to remind people, that for a lot of the period between September 14th and November, a lot of the outdoors at St. Louis is quite usable. And in fact, there are going to be tents outside engineering that are really going to be set up just as places that people can be in small socially distributed groups. But as you know, the science tells us that outdoor gatherings are much less problematic than indoor. And I can easily imagine that some faculty will be in some of these places and meet with folks and either arrange informal or even appointments. So it actually will be the case that we'll be leveraging outdoors quite a bit more than maybe by design. And that's actually one of the cool things about being down in the East End now. We have just a beautiful park and area with chairs and umbrellas and things, and it'll be easily to socially distant, but in a social way.
Is there a protocol in place if a professor gets ill?
Yeah, so in that case, you can think of it coming in two flavors. One is they're ill, but they can still continue to teach, in which case they could teach remotely. If it's going to be an extended illness, then in that case, just like we would do prior to COVID, we would need to have another instructor step in and pick up what was happening with that course. Would be the most common model for an undergrad course. Some departments have already put provisions in place for that. They've actually lined up who the backup instructors would be for various courses.
If we become sick and are taking online classes, could we be required to complete our assignments regardless of our health, or will doctor notes be honored even if we are taking classes online?
So that would be our policies again, just like we had pre-COVID. Now, if your health prohibits you from participating in the class with either assignments or assessments, then we make considerations, and we will continue to do that whether you're online or in person. We will make accommodations for that.
How will academic integrity be enforced? So the same policies will be in place, and the faculty will be enforcing them as they always have. So I don't anticipate there being any changes with how academic integrity is going to be handled or enforced in the coming semester. Will there be an in-person December recognition ceremony? I have not heard specifically what that, if that will take place. I don't think that it will at this point, but nothing has been announced officially yet.
Let me just follow up on that, not so much just about the recognition, but just to reiterate, our goal is to try to achieve our mission as robustly as possible. And part of doing that will mean maintaining health protocols as robustly as possible. And using the December recognition ceremony as an example of something that we would all love to do, but frankly, not doing it doesn't prevent us from fulfilling our mission, and doing it might, by setting up a context in which a viral transmission is much more highly likely. If the virus was, completely tamed at that point in time, I could imagine considering it, but that would be a pretty high bar for us to do an event like that, which is not necessarily mission critical and yet puts students and faculty and staff at risk.
Thank you, Dean Bobick. Is Zoom going to maintain the primary video instruction tool?
Yes, we will continue to use Zoom just like we did in the spring.
And during office hours, will it be possible to go between rooms so that we can work with other students while still being able to easily speak with a professor if needed?
So again, Dean Bobick mentioned there might be some limited opportunities for office hours, formal or informal, to be conducted, say outdoors in tents. But in general, the office hours are going to be, yes.
They might mean Zoom rooms.
Oh, okay.
So the answer to the physical rooms one is, there may be some opportunity to do that.
Right.
This notion of how to move between break rooms, et cetera, it actually would be easier to move between different separate Zoom conferences, and that's not that hard to do. it's a little bit tricky for the professor to set up because you can only host one at a time, but that certainly could be done. So my apologies for not knowing which one we're talking about.
And this is our last question because we are at 7:01 past time. How can students shop for courses? Email the professor for Zoom links. And I know that we've talked about this across the different divisions. And you really need to be enrolled in the class to be able to attend it or be in the wait list for the class. Maybe you could email the professor for a Zoom link. I hadn't thought of that. But normally, I think enrollment or on the wait list is probably the way to go. All right, we've got two more here. We'll go really quickly. When will the schedule for finals come out? Jay, my understanding is that's already been set. But
if it is, I haven't seen the final exam, the actual schedule yet. I haven't seen the actual mapping of days and hours.
So maybe it hasn't been. So that's on the list.
Yeah.
Can students form social pods that study and hang together? Informally, you certainly could.
Well, so.
But as long as there's distancing.
Yeah, I think that's not what they're talking about. When they talk about social pods, they're talking about it as like, you do within your own bubble. Certainly the goal for on-campus housing is to not have that, right? One of the reasons they've gone to everyone having a single is to prevent folks from sort of having to be forced into social contact bubbles. Clearly, students living off campus can do a lot of things that are not under the control of the university. Creating sort of virtual social units, family units to do that, something that they might do. It's obviously increases risk in a variety of ways, because not only do you have to yourself abide by all the protocols, you're now betting on the other people in your pod abiding by those protocols. And that's actually a challenge. So that's sort of a wishy-washy answer, but that's the best we can do. I think we have to wrap up at this point. So we hit to a total of over almost 150 participants here and more on YouTube. Thank you all. I want to thank Professor Jay Turner and Associate Dean Chris Kroeger for not just for this hour. This hour was great, but the amount of work that's being put in by just huge numbers of people within the school to try to make this upcoming fall a powerful educational experience. It's just been tremendous dedication, and Jay and Chris are at the sort of the top of the list of people who've been putting that effort in. So thank you, Jay and Chris. I encourage all of you to reach out to your four-year advisors, as you always should have, because at the end of the day, they're the ones who are going to know where the source of information is to answer the question that you have. They may know the answer themselves, but if they don't, they'll know how to get you where that is. And that all is maintained, right? So that level of communication engagement continues to move forward. So again, thank you all for joining us. Everybody, please do what you need to do to stay safe and stay well. We as an institution believe in the science. We do the science, and we ask all of you to believe the science and do the science as well. So thank you.